All right, so today we are going to be talking about quaesita, questions in Latin, and particularly how we create questions using interrogative pronouns or interrogative adjectives. And we'll have a better understanding of the difference between those two by the end of this slideshow. So that is the goal. However, we have also learned some interrogative adverbs so far this year, although you might not have known to call them that. So before we dig in, how about you retrieve as many question words as you can for Latin, okay? Spend maybe 30 seconds doing this. Pause the video to give yourself this valuable retrieval. All right, I am moving on. So here are some exempla of the interrogative pronouns and adjectives we're going to be looking at, but you might have thought of other words besides quid and quis, which you might remember, like cur, why, or quote, sunt septem et duo. How many are 7 and 2? No one. Or, for example, ubi probe longe ubique tu es. Ubi is where. Ubique is wherever. So ubi es. Where are you? Bene. But those are all examples of adverbs, okay? Meaning they work with nouns. Where are you? Where are you going, right? Working with a verb. Why did you do this? Working with the verb did you do. We are going to work with pronouns and adjectives, and as you might imagine, they're going to function like regular nouns and adjectives would. But without further ado, let's dive into some of these examples. Quid est nomen tibi? This is an old favorite, right? What is your name? See if you can figure out the rest of these questions on your own. Pause the video, and then we'll go over them, okay? All right. Who was Mater Aeneae? Who was the mother of Aeneas? Aliquisne Scit? Does anyone know? Venus est. Remember Venus or Aphrodite talking with Juno about Aeneas and Dido? Cutting that deal. All right, now down here, quod curam est primum. This might be a little bit trickier because we haven't seen this as much, but quod curam est primum. Which chariot est is first? Or qui equus est tertius? Which horse is third? Okay? Qui equus est tertius. And even if you didn't translate these right, I bet you could answer these questions, because if you remember, you answered both of these questions a few classes previously. Okay? So now we're just going to hone our ability to translate them and really understand what's being said. But it's important to remember, too, that sometimes as long as you can understand and create, having a smooth, clear translation to English is just a bonus. Okay? So, as you might have guessed, the first set are pronouns, meaning they function as nouns in their sentence. Where in the second set, they function as adjectives. So if you see quid here is in place of a noun, you'd replace it with a noun. What is the name? What is your name? And you'd replace the quid with a thing, right? My name is Mr. Fleming. Who was the mother of Aeneas? You replace the quis, right, with a person. Here, we're talking about adjectives. Quod does not stand on its own. Quod modifies what word in the sentence? Say it aloud. Hopefully you said curum. Yes, it's modifying the noun curum. In this sentence, what is qui modifying? Equus, which horse, which chariot. So one of the easiest ways to know whether you're dealing with a noun or an interrogative adjective is by looking at whether or not they are followed by a word which they agree with. Quod curum, what chariot? These are both neuter, singular. Qui equus, these are both masculine, singular. So right off the bat there, you see some differences between interrogative pronouns and interrogative adjectives. But now that we understand those differences, let's go look at the forms before looking at some more examples that you can try and translate on your own, okay? So, the nice thing about these forms is that they are almost, actually you have seen all of them before. And right off the bat, you notice that there's very little difference between interrogative pronouns and relative pronouns. Can anyone pause the video and think about this question? If they're so similar in appearance, how am I going to know when cuius is acting as an interrogative pronoun and when cuius is acting as a relative pronoun? Pause the video and think to yourself if you can answer that question. Try and deduce how you might. All right, well, simply put, first off, interrogative pronouns are frequently going to come at the beginning of their sentence, right? Because that's how, just like in English, that's how that works. And second of all, they're going to introduce a question, whereas relative pronouns introduce a relative clause, right? That there's no question involved. So it's that context piece, but then it's also particularly with questions, you're going to oftentimes, specifically with the text we're dealing with, you're going to see that question mark. Okay? Alrighty, let's keep moving. So those are interrogative pronouns, and again, the same as the relative pronoun. The only difference is that neuter is quid now instead of quod, and we should know that because we're familiar with quid meaning what from all those usages we've had during the year. And then that the masculine singular is quis instead of qui or quae. It's ambiguous or masculine or feminine because when you ask a question, who did this, you often are implying that it could be both a male or a female who did it. And so that's a good way to remember that quis can be both. Okay? All right, we're going to move on. Interrogative adjectives. And you'll notice I only showed you the singular for interrogative pronouns, and there will be a reason for that I'll get to shortly. So looking at interrogative adjectives, and now you should be really happy because these are totally the same as relative pronouns. And so you might ask, how am I going to tell the difference? The same way with interrogative pronouns, right, and relative pronouns. You're going to tell by context. You're going to say, oh, these words are coming at the beginning of a question, and that they are modifying a word that immediately follows them. Right, when we went back to these examples, you didn't have any issue realizing that these are not functioning as relative pronouns. And the nice thing is that whether they're relative pronouns or interrogative adjectives, in English we tend to translate these words very similarly as well. So in both languages you see these similarities. Okay, so looking at these forms, again, nothing new, so we're going to move on, but if you want to pause the video to take a picture or write these down, you can. Now we're going to look at the plural, and this is actually doing double duty. It's both the plural for interrogative adjectives and the plural for interrogative pronouns. So the one tricky thing to remember here, I think, is more for pronouns, because while they only had the two columns, because quis was masculine and feminine, in the plural, they split back into three columns. So you would specify qui, quae, or in the neuter, if I want to say what are your names, multiple, instead of quid est nomen tibi, you would say quae sunt nomina tibi. Maybe if you want all the names, okay? Great. So again, take a picture of this if you want. You can also find all of these forms on pages, let me find this real quick, on pages 252, duo centum quinquaginta et duo, at duo centum quinquaginta et tres. Okay? Now, moving on to a few more examples. I give some here. See if you can translate them on your own. If you want to pause the video and do that, or you can pause the video after I do an example if you want to see how I'm going, the strategy. Okay? You should try and do some of these on your own for the practice. Here we go. Cuius ientaculum comedere debeo. So I read this sentence, I look at cuius, and just like with relative pronouns, I say, ooh, that's genitive, so I'm going to translate it as whose. I also translate it as whose more quickly because I look at ientaculum and I say, ooh, that's not genitive. So this is not going to be an interrogative adjective. It's going to be an interrogative pronoun. Whose jentaculum breakfast comedere debe I. Whose breakfast should I eat? And this is said by Flowey Capilli, also known as Goldilocks. Whose breakfast should I eat? So in the next sentence, we see cuius ursi jentaculum comedere debeo. And what we notice is that cuius this time is followed by ursi, from ursus, ursi. So if you want masculine, which means bear. So if you want to try and translate this on your own, now that you've seen an example, pause the video and give it a try. So because they're both genitive, I'm going to take this as an adjective. And you're not going to say whose bears, right? Because that's not how interrogative adjectives work in English. We don't say whose bears, we say which bears jentaculum breakfast debeo should I comedere eat. Okay? Which bear's breakfast? So here it was whose breakfast, here it's which bear's breakfast. Quae ex arbore cadebant. And so the key here is I'm going to see quae and I'm going to see nt. So in order for this to be working with cadebant, it's either going to be feminine plural or neuter plural, right? Qui, quae, quae in the plural forms. Because when I look at the rest of the sentence, I'm going to probably think, they're referring to things here. So I'm going to say, what things were, what things were falling from the tree? You could also get away with what was falling from the tree. But in order to really convey that you know that it's multiple things, you probably want to say what something. And if you had more context, you could say, you could imply more. For this next one, we have quae poma ex arbore cadebant. Now, quae could agree with poma, which comes from pomum, pomi, neuter. So quae could agree with poma, so we're going to say, instead of what, well, you could probably say what berries, but it might be more appropriate to say which berries were falling from the tree. Which berries were falling from the tree, okay? So again, when we recognize it as an adjective, it's smooth just to take it as which, no matter what case it is, because it's just modifying the noun. Okay, great. So now that we've done some Latin to English, let's look at here are all the translations if you want to take a picture and add them, or look at them all at once. And for the next one, here we go. I'll do a couple examples here for that practice. And then I encourage you to do the rest on your own, okay? So here we go. What was separating Pyramus and Thisbe? Does this sound like a pronoun or an adjective to you? Pronoun. So I'm in the quid category, right? And is this a quis or a quid? It's what, not who, so it's quid. Was separating. So quid is third person. It's like saying the boy was separating. So quid separabat Pyramum et Thisbe. Right? Quid separabat Pyramum et Thisbe. Here,